Hello, Chick back with another summary, part 3 of Halo First Strike. If you missed either of the first two, they will be in the description below. Enjoy. Last we left off with Cortana jumping Ascendant Justice to the extraction point to pick up the Spartans and humans survivors on board the Covenant dropship, leaving Reach. The shields of the now hybrid vessel Ascendant Justice dropped for a short time to let the dropship enter the launch bay, then destroyed 2 Covenant cruisers before jumping into Slipspace. However, the Slipspace, quote-unquote, they had jumped to was not the typical one, with a blue mist about the area and somehow 14 other Covenant ships followed close by. They figured out that it was due to the holy relic that Dr. Halsey had. It was warping Slipspace and emitting a crazy amount of radiation, so John had Anton put it in the reactor compartment of the longsword. The Covenant ships following shot plasma at them, but the plasma faded out of existence, so trying to fire weapons in this new Slipspace wasn't a good idea. Admiral Whitcomb tries to tell Cortana, but it was too late. She had fired on the other ships, unable to do much damage because of the Slipspace that they once again are in. Halsey explains that the Slipspace like this, physics believed slipstream space is a highly compressed version of normal space, layered out over and under itself like a ball of yarn. Now imagine that our ball of yarn is looped and knotted. The threads are not solid, however, so plasma, light, and matter jump from one thread to another, given the slightest quantum fluctuation. And because of the mass of the ship, it isn't popping up all around the Slipspace like the plasma shots. So even though the Covenant can't really attack them, just being in this sort of Slipspace is doing a number to their ship. They then find out saying Healy on board sabotaged the main drive conduit, so the Spartans will have to go out and repair it. Pulaski volunteers to fly them so it would be faster, and Admiral Whitcomb debates for a second and then says okay. Locklear isn't a fan of this idea, but Pulaski hands him the bandana, telling him to hold on to it for her till she gets back. Yeah, that's gonna go well. 6 Spartans and Pulaski board the dropship and head out to the location to repair. Fred was Blue 2, Lee was Blue 3, the Zero-G combat specialist, which was something John greatly appreciated for this mission. Anton was Blue 4, and the one John was most worried about. Many occasions he expressed his discomfort in Zero-G, so he was mostly on ground operations, specializing in stealth, camouflage, and tracking. Will was Blue 5, and the quiet one that never failed a mission. Apparently he used to be the one that joked all the time, keeping their spirits high, but over time he had hardened like the rest of them and lost that special trait. And finally Grace, who was Blue 6, the demolition expert that lacked a temper whatsoever. How about that? They all acknowledge that they are good to go, and Pulaski takes them in to repair the 3-meter hole. John, Grace, and Fred search for enemy contacts while Anton, Lee, and Will bring the welders and patch the hole. With about 2 minutes to go till repairs are done, Camouflage deletes attack. John, Lee, Will, and Anton fire on them from different positions while Grace and Fred continue welding the hole shut. Then a plasma bolt from Slipspace flew in directly at the dropship, impacting and killing Pulaski, Lee, and Anton. Also flash vaporizing all the elites that had been attacking them as well. Everyone else was unconscious, but the hole was patched. John got everyone tethered to the deck and told the Admiral that it was all patched and good to go. While the Spartans were out there on their mission, Whitcomb was on deck with everyone else, Cortana telling him that they had about 5 minutes until hull integrity would fail and they would die. Not good, obviously. So he was coming up with a plan to fight back before dropping out of Slipspace. He was distracted by Kelly on deck, and he wanted to know constantly of her progress and knew it was a problem. So he had Dr. Halsey remove her from the bridge, which really pissed off Halsey because Kelly was in such bad shape. Sergeant Johnson and Locklear helped move her out. Then John came over comms telling him that the patch was sealed and that Whitcomb told him to hold on because it was going to be a bumpy ride. The Admiral decided to set a collision course with one of the cruisers, since Cortana estimated that there was only about 3 to 5 instead of the 14 they originally counted because most of the ships were illusions. So on the way, he had the ship rolling to spread damage along the layers of the ship instead of just one spot. And when they were about just a kilometer away, he ordered to fire plasma turrets and depressurize the bay, redirecting the ship to barely miss the Covenant vessel, destroying it with a point-blank attack. Pretty slick tactics right there, but he wasn't done. He then moved toward a broken Covenant ship and pushed the hull toward the other cruiser nearby because the same tactics would not work again. Another intercept course had been set and all reverse thrusters ready to fire. Once close enough, he ordered to engage the thrusters, slowing them down while the hull of the broken ship kept its momentum moving toward the carrier. After impact, Ascendant Justice fired and destroyed the ship, dropping out of Slipspace and cutting all power to the engines, wondering where they had just come out at. John wakes up in the med bay, still in his armor, wondering how he got there. Cortana shows up and explains what happened and tells him that Anton and Lee were killed, along with Pulaski. He further asked about Kelly and Linda. Kelly was recovering from second-degree burns on 72% of her body, and will be fully recovered in a couple days, but speed will be hampered greatly till then. Linda was a different story. Not really alive or dead still per se, but still in the between area in a cryogenic state. The Admiral and Halsey are debating reviving her before reaching a major medical facility, so Dr. Halsey will brief him when there is more information. All of the others had been accounted for. Slipspace travel was still possible, but it wouldn't do much good because of the artifact. It emits radiation that can't be contained when in slipspace. It would only take about another few hours before killing everyone on board, even those in Mjolnir suits. But Whitcomb is debating the risk of life anyways to get to Highcom, which John knew if the risk was that high, there had to be a reason. So he asked why. Apparently when Cortana told him before, it didn't register while he was asleep, so she tells him again. The Covenant had found Earth and are preparing a large-scale attack. They will meet at a structure called the Unyielding Hierophant before making the jump to Earth. John makes his way to the bridge to talk to the Admiral, when Cortana tells him that Dr. Halsey said he should be resting, but he tells Cortana he doesn't take orders from civilians. Cortana tells John that his attitude has been sour since before the Battle of Reach, which is kind of funny because so is hers since Halo. John doesn't really respond with much and just continues his way. Havison and Whitcomb were surprised to see John, but he tells him that he's at 100%, which is a lie, but he can't argue with a Spartan. Halsey also calls him, asking him to come down when he's done on the bridge. The Admiral shows John what's going on. They are having issues navigating and can't seem to do much in need of repair to their ships. When John realizes that it's the Eridanish system that they are in, John remembers the mission they went on to capture General Watts, telling them that there is a colony there, just not one on UNSC radar. They're hoping it's still intact and can get them in fighting shape. When John finally makes his way down to Dr. Halsey, she tells him that there are some things that need to be set straight before going back to Earth. The logs from the Halo mission of Private Jenkins, Locklear, and Sergeant Johnson don't seem to add up. The fact that Johnson was able to survive the flood interaction while everyone else was killed couldn't have happened by chance. John doesn't understand how he survived, but Halsey seems to, explaining that it's because of the Boren syndrome, something he got when exposed to large amounts of radiation when throwing all of the plasma grenades from a crate he found. The syndrome includes migraines, amnesia, and brain tumors, and without treatment, death. When looking at the next page, Johnson refused treatment in order to get back to the fight. So the reason the flood couldn't take Johnson over was because of his nervous system being so jumbled that the flood infection forms couldn't force a match. John says that he understands, but Halsey says there's more to explain. She has 2 drives that were made to be given to Havison, one having all the Halo data on it and her analysis of the flood and possibly how to counter them. The second has the source material as well, with Johnson and Jenkins' logs. Halsey tells them that with the second one, they would have a slightly better chance of finding a way to replicate the syndrome to make humans immune. When John tells her that he would just give the second one, she tells him that it will have Johnson killed. Oni would dissect him basically to figure it out, but it would still be a 1 in a billion chance. She wants John to try and make a decision she never could. Instead of sacrificing a few lives to save the rest, try to save them all. So John leaves with both, and Halsey then erases with Cortana's memory of the conversation and the logs since she can't trust even her with the information. Kinda odd, but alright. They also figure out why it was about 3 weeks' time for John to get back, but only about a week had passed on Reach. More like 8 days. The artifact can also bend time. Here we go. Basically, it wanted to make sure the Master Chief and Cortana made it back to extract the other Spartans and Halsey with the artifact. Crazy. But that's what they go with. Halsey also sees that SAM-034 was listed as MIA along with the others that are all listed as either MIA or WIA, so missing in action or wounded in action. Cortana tells her that Spartans never die, and in order to keep morale high. Halsey is frustrated with that logic, wishing that it were true. Then decides that she has to do what she can to save the rest of her Spartans, even if that means betraying everyone's trust in order to do so. On their way to the asteroid rebel base, John directs where they need to go in order to get there. The Admiral wanted to know more about the mission he had at the base. John explains how they went in, captured General Watts, and extracted with him alive. Shocked him, to say the least, when he asked if it went off without a hitch. The Master Chief tells him not entirely. When they left, they blew their cargo bay to escape, which caused some casualties. So they probably won't be happy to see any UNSC coming in. But they don't have much choice in the matter since they both badly need repairs. Havison, though, although he knew about the insurrection, didn't understand why humans would stay separated during the Covenant-Human War. Some just wanted to hide instead of fighting. Just then, Dr. Halsey walked in, looking exhausted, but tells everyone that Linda will be fine. The flash clone organs took. The Spartans nod at each other and let out deep breaths. John thanks Halsey for not letting her die. John finally points out the asteroid that the rebels are hiding in, once closer after trying to hail them, politely I might add, also realizing that it's probably a trap. The Admiral has Cortana charge up all turrets even though only one is actually functional. Whitcomb points out that the rebels don't know that, and she charges them all up. Finally, a bunch of merchant and light ships come flying in to surround the hybrid vessel, none of which can really do much, although one of the ships was a Chiropetra class ship that was supposedly capable of slipspace travel, but any of them discontinued by Oni were removed of the slipspace drives, therefore they shouldn't be capable. But If none of the ships were a threat, why would they show this type of force? Governor Jacob Giles introduces himself as the leader of the base, then calls the admiral a captain before being corrected. When Admiral Whitcomb insists on being able to board for repairs, Giles tells him that he isn't in any position to insist, and at this moment, Cortana finds the nukes hidden among the asteroids around them, so he wasn't as stupid as he thought. However, when they fire the only plasma weapon at another asteroid about the size of their base and destroy it, bluffing that the other two turrets are pointed at the rebel base, Giles' smile disappears and he decides to invite them for dinner to discuss repairs. When they leave, Whitcomb tells Cortana to blast the place if they are not back in 30 minutes. Only Fred and John accompany those that went to dinner to be protected but not seem too threatening in a fragile situation. At first, when trying to talk about what they need, Giles is relaxed and not fully engaged, but Whitcomb explained that what happened and what was coming. Giles was getting further frustrated before slamming the table and yelling "Bloody Eliza," which was a patron saint of vacuum. Popular for civilian pilots. Fred and John's sights came up quickly but were brought back down when Admiral raised his hand. He told Giles that all they need is for them to cooperate and help them to get their ship as repaired as possible. Once that would be done, they would jump to Earth, they would evacuate the base, and promise them amnesty where they went. Giles laughs, saying that he doesn't really believe anything he's been told. How does he know what he said has been true? But of course, perfectly timed as always, a Covenant ship appeared in space. And Admiral Whitcomb points and tells Giles, "There's your proof." Once back on board, they communicate with Giles on what to do. Whitcomb tells Giles that after they fire their turret to drop the Covenant ship's shields, to use the nukes to blast the ship. Giles laughs since they bluffed having nukes, so they will just have to use the other turrets to destroy the Covenant ship, but it's Whitcomb's turn to laugh since they bluffed having more than just one turret. So both of them overestimated each other and admitted that if circumstances were different, it would be kind of amusing. So Whitcomb tells Giles to not attack since they would just wipe the floor with them and just get his people evacuated. They would try to distract the ship away. Giles thanks him and signs off for the time being. They move out and try to fire at the Covenant ship, but the magnetic coils that shape the plasma overloaded, so they have no way of firing. John figured out that they could use the Mac gun coils, though, and shape the plasma instead. Odd that Cortana doesn't think of this, but again, she's hampered by the amount of knowledge she has, so it's still kind of odd for her. So she calculates what is needed in order to make it work. The Covenant vessel went around the planetoid in slingshot maneuver, so Cortana sent out drones to be able to see when the ship would come into line of sight. Just before it does, Cortana charges the plasma shot that burns through a 30-meter section of Ascendant Justice's hull, which implodes and fires toward the enemy ship. In one shot, it takes down the shields and blows the ship up. But this leaves their hybrid ship crippled. Then Giles shows up with other ships to tow them back for repairs. Haverson was confused since they have them in a good situation for them to force terms, but Whitcomb tells Haverson that Giles realizes this is only the first part of a major battle. Giles needs them to try and save him and his people. Once docked and repairs begun, the Spartans were ordered to get their suits fixed and get at least 6 hours of sleep, which they do. And Linda is up and walking around. Fred and Will are repairing her upper body armor and helmet, and she jokes that she now knows what it takes to get some R&R. Fred jokes that he heard that she spent the whole time sleeping too, and Will even chimes in that's why she's a sniper. All of which made John happy that they were able to make light of something terrible, even though he felt he couldn't join in because of his role as leader. Which sucks, because if anything, he should be allowed to bond too. Locklear and Johnson walk in, and they get ready to talk tactics on attacking the Covenant. Dr. Halsey calls John to ask for Kelly in order to inject some more dermocortic steroids, plus some assistance with the other matters. John sends her, and Kelly asks them not to take off without her. They go over what they know. The Covenant are going to regroup and fuel, and then make their way to Earth. Even if they beat them to Earth, there's no way Earth can win against 500 ships that would appear. It would just be a repeat of Reach. However, Johnson suggests that attacking the uneven elephant, as he calls it, unyielding Hierophant, obviously as John corrects, and Will says it fits the timetable. It's on the way to Earth, so they know where and when they will be, and are vulnerable because there's no way they think that they will be attacked. So John has everyone get ready while he takes the plan to the Admiral. It was time for the first strike. Dr. Halsey gives Kelly her injections and tells her that she will need to rest for a week. Kelly's not a fan of this because of the mission John is trying to set up. Halsey decides to administer a sedative to knock her out and take her on a mission of her own. She has Locklear help move her to the Governor's ship and gives Locklear the crystal, telling him that it cannot fall in the Covenant hands. Plus it emits a beacon, basically alerting any Covenant nearby when they jump to Slipspace with it, so she trusts him to be able to do the right thing, which she acknowledges. Then she shuts the door to the ship, leaving with Kelly. When the Master Chief reaches the bridge, he decides that he will give the second ship to Haverson with everything including Johnson and Jenkins' reports, since increasing the odds of the Flood cure of sorts was worth it. Hell, Johnson would probably volunteer, to be honest. But before being able to talk about anything, he notices Giles' ship leave. But upon closer look, it was actually Halsey leaving with Kelly. Of course just then, Giles shows up wondering why his ship has left, and the Admiral tells him he's trying to figure that out. When he tries to hail the ship, they get a non-response code due to a higher priority mission, and it even jumps into Slipspace. Harrison was wrong about it not having Slipspace capabilities. To make matters even worse, 2 Covenant cruisers show up in system. Giles gets his people off and starts evacuating while the Ascendant Justice gets engines online and ready to fight these ships. But it just gets even worse. More ships show up, and Cortana counts 30 of different classes and sizes. The Admiral orders Cortana to prep for Slipspace jump, admitting it's probably not right to leave the rebels defenseless, but even if they stay, they will all die anyways. Even though he'd rather stay and fight to the death, he knows he needs to get back to Earth and warn them. So that's what they do. They get ready to jump. But before jumping, Locklear is walking around with a robotic dolly collecting supplies for the suicide mission the Master Chief was planning. He pulled on the bandana around his bicep, still mourning Pulaski's death, talking to himself about how he had plans for them. After all the fighting, he just wanted some rest, but he tells himself that he isn't going to die. He tries to look for some alcohol for happy hour, but it's postponed when he feels the ship moving for Slipspace. Not wanting to go through another Slipspace battle, or have the Covenant from everywhere, for all he knows, follow them, he decides there's only one thing left to do. Using a can of C7, he covers the crystal with the foaming explosive, setting the timer for 3 seconds, and dives behind the robotic dolly. Unfortunately, it isn't far enough, and he is killed by the blast. Everyone that's left on board, minus Harrison, who was overlooking the site where Locklear died, is in the Officers Club. Whitcomb states that from there it should be smooth sailing to Earth, since they happen to be in normal Slipspace now because of the crystal object that was destroyed by Locklear. Harrison eventually shows up and tells everyone that Locklear's death was quick and painless, but isn't sure why he did it. He starts to blame Halsey, which internally bugs John, but Whitcomb silences him in order not to create issues that they don't know. John tells the Admiral that they maybe shouldn't just head straight to Earth, to which Whitcomb knew he wasn't going to like what he was going to say, but wants to hear it anyways. John explains his plan to drop out of Slipspace at the unyielding Hierophant and destroy it, and hopefully the ship's docking there, furthermore halting the Covenant advance to Earth. Whitcomb denies permission because they can't risk dropping out of Slipspace. John tells him that they wouldn't have to. The Spartans would drop out with a dropship. Once far enough from the Gettysburg or Ascendant Justice, they would enter normal space, which they could survive due to their Mjolnir armor. Whitcomb still can't grant it because they would need Cortana. Harrison volunteers because he can crack through Covenant locks, but again, he can't survive the drop from Slipspace. Cortana has another idea though. Copy herself and let John take the copy. With that, the Admiral pours some whiskey, which none of the Spartans take part in, and pours shots for himself, Harrison, and Johnson, then grants the permission to Master Chief. Once they left Ascendant Justice, it was about 100 times worse than the Slipspace with the crystal. Their armor filled with gel and pressurized in order to keep them from breaking bones and dying, but it almost felt like it still wasn't enough. They finally come into normal space, and John smacks his face on his faceplate, and then vision clears and notices all the other Spartans hung limp in their harnesses. Once everyone's up and moving, we notice nobody's really injured, but the Cortana copy, or what I'll call her from now on as Cortana 2, tells them that there are tons of comm traffic and they have been pinged 3 times. The Master Chief says to tell them that they need to be towed, which they actually do. Because of how hectic it is at the unyielding Hierophant, nobody is really paying close attention to anything. Since who would actually be able to attack them at this point? Nobody really, except maybe the Spartans. Duh. All of them get their gear together and kept comms clear from now. After docking, Huragok enter the dropship and ignore the Spartans. They only care about fixing, so they pay no attention to them. They move out and John inserts Cortana 2 into the terminal. She gets schematics on the station and lets them know that they can blow the entire 30-kilometer refit station by overloading the reactors. The problem is that they have to get to the control center in order to do this, which is 7 kilometers further into the installation. Cortana 2 copies herself to leave in the system so they can now have comms, and she can still open doors and see what's going on for them. Cortana guides them to what she describes as an open space, which is literally an open area that they need to run across. Linda gets on a roof in order to cover them, and once set up, they sprint across. Problems begin at this point because they are running across and reports are going out to all channels. Cortana is doing what she can to squelch reports and tells them that there are brutes on this station. Linda kills a hunter pair and some elites. The other 4 make their way to a building with 3 rows of pillars inside. A good place for an ambush, which is exactly what it is. Brutes surprise attack the Spartans, killing Grace with their explosive rounds from the brute shot. John is knocked down and pummeled until his shields drop, and the brute starts choking him. The Master Chief starts to black out. He hears gunfire nearby, knowing that he's on his own to deal with this brute. John brings his legs up and twists his body, kicking and shooting his arms out, knocking the brute on its back. The brute flips over, but John launches onto its back, grabbing one of the arms, pulling it back and trying to pin him to the floor. It starts to lift both of them with one arm, but John says, "Not so fast," priming a grenade, putting it under the brute, and knocking the arm out from under it, making him land on the grenade. It goes off, launching them both into the air, but the brute was dead at this point. The Master Chief gets up and moves to the entrance, seeing Grace laying face down, blood and gel spreading on the floor. Two brutes attack him, and he retreats into the building again, setting one of the locust mines to a 7-second timer and throws it at the entry. Lets everyone know that it's going to detonate over comm, which gets the brutes' attention again. They charge in and are consumed by the explosion. He then moves to Grace, and she's flatlined, obviously. The brute shot impacts decimated her chest cavity. So he set her armor to self-destruct, and they move on. They were not going to be able to bring her along. Setting her funeral fire was the next best thing that they could do. Once into the next area, Cortana 2 locks the door from behind them, but tells John that the AIs on the unyielding Hierophant are causing problems. They make it to the reactors, and Master Chief tells her to start the countdown now. The Covenant could dip out to Earth any time, so the sooner they started, the better. Cortana 2 starts overloading and tells Blue Team to get the hell out of the installation. On their way back, they see many Covenant soldiers circling the temple. Grace's armor detonated, killing a dozen grunts and 4 elites, buying time for the rest of Blue Team to escape. As they made their way to the exit, John tells Linda over comm to take out Banshee pilots that come to Blue Team, not wanting her to respond. That way they didn't track her position as well. When the Banshees get closer, Linda kills them one at a time. Only one shot per kill, seeming that the shot should be more and more difficult, but each Banshee fell to the ground. Some damage, but still flyable. All 3 of them board them and head to the exit to set up escape. Linda still covering them, knocking some other Banshee flyers out of the air that were chasing the Spartans. Once to the window, they set up the last Lotus mine, and John patches to Cortana 2, asking if she can take down the airlocks, opening an exit for them. Hundreds of Cortanas are talking all at the same time, but finally, a single one talks over the rest, dedicated to talking to him. She explains that she was overwhelmed by the Covenant AI and had to create multiple copies. They happened to be fragmenting, so this wouldn't match much longer. John tells Fred and Will he's going to go get Linda, and if he isn't back in 3 minutes, they are to blow the window and escape. They hesitate for a second, but then they nod. He tells them that he can't leave her. He takes off in the Banshee back toward her. He would either save her if she's alive or die trying. John flies back and is chased by a couple more Banshees. Linda takes them both out with ease, so she has to be nearby and in line of sight. Once clear, he radios Linda, needing her location so he could pick her up. When he finds her, she's hanging upside down by one leg and forearm tied to a rope. She had made all those impossible shots upside down in an awkward position. Yeah, there's more proof that she's, the best sniper ever. She jumps down to John, and he grabs her hand and pulls her on top of him inside the Banshee. Then, they fly back to the others quickly, telling Cortana to blow the airlocks, but there were so many Cortanas in the channel, it was impossible to understand. Finally, another tells John she split off another AI to talk directly to him, although she literally did that before he left to go get Linda. So things are getting much worse as time goes on. After a struggle, she finally is able to open the airlock, and the glass started to crack. Then all the Spartans are 10 meters away, since Fred and Will caught up to John with their Banshees, and the glass shattered and vacuum sucked everything out nearby into space. John crashed trying to roll the Banshee and fell from the Banshee flying into space. Linda is able to get a hold of him and pull him back into the Banshee, where they take off from the installation. The Spartans head back to the dropship, load up, and proceed to just get away. They hear chaos in the Covenant comms, and with Cortana's repeatedly yelling error codes, but the E-band is active, and a 6-tone tune was playing. So John said, "Ollie Ollie Oxenfree," but nobody understood who could have sent that signal. But Admiral Whitcomb responds, asking what took them so long. John asks what they are doing there, and Whitcomb says that Harrison thought it would be smart to drop out of Slipspace and gather some intel on the way. And with how many ships are around, even if the place is to blow, there is still enough to take out Earth even with a warning. So Whitcomb wants to do something about it now. He checks that the Spartans were able to accomplish their mission, and John acknowledges that they did. Blue Team continues to heading to the far side of the moon to meet up before they leave. Once they get to the ship, only the Gettysburg is there. Where did Descendant Justice go? Once back on the Gettysburg, John only sees Sergeant Johnson and Cortana on board, asking where the Admiral and Harrison were. Johnson shows them on a drone. Ascendant Justice was heading straight toward the unyielding Hierophant. No slipspace capabilities and little to no firepower. Turns out they were luring more Covenant ships to the installation. Once in communication with Admiral, John tries to tell him that the Covenant ships will just wipe him out before they can fire a single shot. But Whitcomb has a holographic copy of the relic and sent the images to all the enemy ships, telling them that it's theirs for the taking if they have the balls to board the ship and face Earth's best warriors, which makes Whitcomb laugh. The Covenant vessels surround Ascendant Justice, and the installation explodes, enveloping everything nearby. Of the 500 ships, only about a dozen survived, a tactical victory for mankind versus a superior enemy. Admiral Whitcomb and Lieutenant Haverson add themselves to the list of men and women that sacrificed themselves to keep the human race alive. While plotting their course, Cortana asks John about her copy, wondering if it was something that was going to come for her. John tells her that her programming is fine and that they wouldn't have survived without her, which does seem to calm her down. She tells them an ETA for Earth is 35 hours. Johnson then hands the data crystal back to John, which he had given to Haverson, stating that he'd have to deliver it for him. John decides that just one life can have an impact on war and decides to destroy the crystal that has Johnson's files on it, still having the other to turn into Oni, which is good for Johnson. Woo! The Master Chief is happy to take this victory and vows to be there when the next one starts and refuses to let humanity fall as long as he's alive. In the prologue of the book, we get the aftermath view of the Covenant and specifically the Prophets. They showed up where the unyielding Hierophant was before the detonation and are scanning everything in proximity, looking for any hint of what happened. The Prophet of Truth was in the Great Chamber, surrounded by the Honor Guard elites. When the door opens, Tartarus walks in and bows, the brute that killed his uncle Maccabeus in Halo Contact Harvest. Truth has all his guards leave, and Tartarus walked forward. He shows Truth what was found in orbit. Shards of a holy relic that was destroyed by Locklear was in Tartarus' hand. Truth says it doesn't matter because they could still move forward towards Earth, and the incompetent High One that lost the Ascendant Justice would be punished for their failure. To them, nothing could stand in their way. In the adjunct of this book, there are a few short stories or entries. The first being a letter that a man named Charles Van Kirk wrote to a woman named Amy, offering condolences to her because of Sam's death, telling her that he was a hero and died as one. In the end, you realize that they are insurrectionists blaming the UNSC for losses in the outer colonies because they don't care about them. They only protect the inner colonies, which is a lie, but obviously the Annies don't really care, and it enforces their narrative. The second one is Tug of War, which is a story about a man named Oliver Birch who makes his living by prospecting for Warner and Ives. He's prospecting Sha Fujikawa Slipspace drives, to be exact. He finds one in a debris field over Biko and heads back to his ship. He finds out that it's not a commercial drive, but a military one, saddlebox type. He has to deliver a drive to Oni, but also has a date. Wanting to do both, he programs his ship with the saddlebox drive and moves the old one to another ship, When he puts the plan to task, something goes terribly wrong, and the other ship disintegrates when trying to jump. So Birch gets into cryo with his dog Mabel, activating a locator beacon before falling asleep until rescue arrives. The next entry is a debriefing with Fred and Dr. Veronica Clayton. It's supposedly a psych evaluation of Fred 104 from a month ago on a descent down to Reach, because 4 Spartans were killed during the descent and 6 more injured beyond use, her words. He is at fault of the worst Spartan mission to be attempted, basically pointing out all the possible mistakes, such as his comm incident that Kelly covered for, them being eager to protect Reach because they think of it as home, even because he wanted to volunteer for the space op and led the mission to the ground was a problem apparently. Mind you, all this is going on while the battle for Earth is happening. Fred gets frustrated with this waste of time by someone who has never even saw a planet glassed. She keeps it up until Admiral Hood walks in and ends it, having her removed and Fred sent to Earth. Like, I get it, she's there to make sure the investment is stable and figure out why Reach went horribly wrong, aside from the fact that Reach was the biggest attack ever seen. But like I said, Hood puts a stop to the interrogation, as it turned out to be, and gets Fred back to where he wants him to be, fighting for humanity. The last entry is a short story about Petra Janek, a war journalist that is looking for a story involving Cortana on an untouched world by the Covenant for SETI. She had tried to send a message to the Master Chief about High Charity heading towards Earth with an army of Flood, the solution being on the Ark, which apparently doesn't involve firing any of the remaining Halo rings either. Janek decides to try and exchange her cruise ticket for a flight to Earth. And that is pretty much where the book leaves off, stopping the Covenant from wiping out Earth. Halo 2 is pretty much what takes place next, or Ghost of Onyx novel-wise, if not including the games. I hope you all enjoyed these videos, and comment down below if you have any questions or something you'd like to say. Ghost of Onyx is what I'll be doing next, and will be in the description below. Have a great day. Chick Chang out.